we've all heard the sayings, how do you, journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Or how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Or, there are all these sayings, and it goes back to the Bible and earlier, right? I mean, this is not new, these are not new sayings, but they're showing up in different forms. What's lost in those short descriptions, however, is that every step is not equivalent. If it were just that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, everyone would pursue their goals. Everyone would push back against adversity. You can read the inspirational stories as many times as one needs, and I do think inspirational stories are of very high value. In fact, I think they're vicarious dopamine. I think they give us the sense that we could, which then orients us to the world again.
So maybe it's possible for me.
That's right. So let's say, let's take the example of somebody who's...
but just to finish that story of, it's not about just taking a single step and one step at a time. Is it because there's adversities every 10 steps you go, and so it's harder and harder? So it's not just
it's just very nonlinear. It's some days go, I know this from my scientific career, it's, some days it's easy, some days it's hard, it's all over the place, right? So I think the thing to remember is that dopamine is this incredibly powerful molecule that allows us to buffer the effort process. It allows us to be in effort longer, and it allows us to actually eventually enjoy the process of effort.
And not think about the reward, but just say, I'm enjoying the process.
Right. Well, you just described the first step. The first step in learning to attach dopamine to the effort process, which is the key operation in order to succeed, is to be very careful about how much you focus on the end goal. Keeping the goal in mind is important for like a proper orientation. You have to know the ultimate destination. But if at any point we were to evaluate our progress relative to that end goal, or if we don't know what the end goal is, there's a huge gap there, and it can feel overwhelming.
And depressing, and I'm not good enough,
That's right.
I should just give up, what am I doing this for?
That's right.
And those thoughts will affect us.
And they're very realistic, right? Yeah. I mean, as Carol will say, and other people have said in the psychology field, positive self-talk, oftentimes, unless you do it correctly, you're badly wrong. Lying to yourself won't work. Saying I'm a winner when you haven't lost or you haven't won yet is great, but that's not the most effective use of these systems.
Well, you're also being out of integrity with yourself. You're telling yourself a lie.
Right.
You're like, and then you're losing your ability to have confidence because you're just lying to yourself.
Right. And if it's really extreme, there's a name for it. It's called delusional, right? right? And people will start to point that out, and then it becomes harder to recruit people into your goals. So I think the key thing is to attach that sense of reward to the effort process. It's saying, look, I am oriented in the right direction and rewarding the things you're not doing. I'm not back on my heels. I'm not just staying, in bed in the morning. A good example of this came to me recently. I have a good friend. He did 9 years in the SEAL teams. His name is Pat Dossett, and we were talking about the Admiral McRaven thing. Get up and make your bed, and and they really do that. And I think the way it was described was, so that at the end of the day, even if everything doesn't go well, your bed is still made. Mm-hmm. For me, that's not that big of a reward, frankly.
Right.
So I said that, and I
love it though. I make my bed.
I definitely make my bed in the morning. But I mean, going back and seeing that at the end of a hard day. Mm-hmm. It's not enough. I felt like there was something else there. So I asked him, he said, well, it's very interesting because part of it is about not just making your bed, but it's the things you're not doing by making your bed. You're not lying in bed and ruminating. You're not back on your heels.
You're not on your phone.
That's right.
Yeah.
When you look at, and you have spent a lot of time with people in high-performing communities, mainly through some consulting work, but what you find is that we can all either be back on our heels, flat-footed, or forward center of mass. And when you look at people who are in these high-performance communities, they try and keep their center of mass forward, almost through what seem like trivial things, like making your bed or making the cup of coffee. But it's not just about what you're doing; it's all the things you're not doing that can put you down the path of ruminating or put you down the path of unhealthy behavior. So the key to this is, if we want to be very concrete, we should probably focus on actions. And I'll use fitness as an example because it translates to everybody, whereas people's circumstances differ. Let's say somebody really wants to take on a fitness routine. They hate running, or they want to lose weight in a healthy way, this kind of thing. So we've all heard the example, well, you put your shoes by the door on day 1. Day 2, you put them on. Day 3, you go out the door. Day 4, you walk around the block, and then, and then eventually, like, they're running marathons. Okay, great. But to sustain that behavior, or even to make the behavior pleasurable and to give you energy, the key is to subjectively reward those steps. So it's not going to be, let's say I go out and I run a mile, and my goal is to run 10 miles in a few weeks. The key is, as you're in the strain of that mile, the hard part, you want to tell yourself, this is the good part. This is the part that gives me energy. And I'll be very surprised if people don't actually feel like they could continue further. So it's a journey of 1,000 miles starts with is made up of, single steps. But the key is to reward the harder steps, not the easier ones and not the ones where you get the thing that you want.
Don't reward yourself for putting your shoes on and taking a step outside.
You could if that was a huge barrier for you.
If it's very hard.
If it was very hard for you.
But running the 10 miles is hard.
Right. Find the wall and push a little bit further through that wall and reward that process. So this is why I think reps in the gym, the final reps, like reps to failure, are usually not the best example. First of all, most people aren't doing reps to failure, and it doesn't translate to young kids and stuff where they probably shouldn't be doing heavy reps to failure, this kind of thing. What you want, however, is if you're going to go there, to think about this is the hard part, because that's when adrenaline, norepinephrine are getting maxed out, and that's when you have an opportunity to bring dopamine in and teach those neural pathways to slam that back down. And I don't want to highlight them too much because they are a very niche and specialized community, but you look at people in special operations, you look at the process, like the whole evaluation process of who gets in and who doesn't. It's really about putting people into stress and seeing who can not just make it through that stress, but buffer that stress. Reward the process through teamwork, reward the process of stress through some internal dialogue that has everything to do with not being back on your heels, not being flat-footed, but center of mass forward. And I should also be clear, I'm not talking about everybody being super aggro and always like,
work. Yeah.
In fact, if you're spending too much epinephrine, if you're too much of an adrenaline junkie, you will burn out eventually. Unless you can find ways to recover yourself or to buffer that with dopamine. And the recovery process is especially important. There's a second reward system. So you've got the dopamine system, and I guess to really put a box around it, the subjective reward needs to be done at the hardest portion of a process. The tough conversation with a significant other, it's like when it's really tough and that's when you want to start telling yourself, this is the good part because I'm not speaking, or this is the good part because
I'm not reacting.
Right, I'm not reacting, or this is the good part because I'm probably not doing it correctly, but I'm on the right path, right? They're upset, they're not feeling your empathy, this kind of thing, or you're not really understanding what's going on, you're getting frustrated. But if you tell yourself, this is the neural pathway getting ground in there, like really dialed in, so that the next time I'm going to breeze right past this. Yeah. That's really how the process works. Because remember, no one comes along and drips dopamine in your ear, even if you get $1 billion, or you win a Nobel Prize, or you win the presidency. It's all internal. These neurochemicals are all internal. And while some of them are designed to be released in response to things very reflexively, like food, sex, sleep, all these things will trigger these neurochemicals, we have this big forebrain which allows us to place subjective context on things.
How do you do it then? How do you bring dopamine in your brain subjectively through daily conversation with yourself?
So there's a process I'm going through right now where I'm trying to write a book, and it's hard. And I was told that the harder it is, the better I'm probably doing it. And I was like, great. And my editor's ready to kill me, and because I'm slow, and I know, and I'm a very slow person. I drive people crazy. I'm like glacially slow because science is slow, and I like to get things right.
You want to rush it. Yeah.
I like to get things right, but I'm very proud of the fact that everything we've published, I can stand behind. It was the best we could do with the tools at the time, and I just know that when I look back on a writing career or a scientific career, I want to be able to say, every journal we put it in was rock solid. Everything was rock solid. Mm-hmm. We had fun doing it. The relationship. So I go slow.
Yeah.
But as a consequence, what I'm finding is there are a lot of interferences these days. I think social media is great. I teach neuroscience on social media because I think it's important to do public education.
But it's a distraction too.
But it's incredible. And it's incredible how much time and energy it can take. So what I've started doing now is I turn off my phone and I lock it in a safe. And I experience extreme anxiety.
Right?
It's so weird.
Why is that? Is it because it gives you so much dopamine that when you're not having it?
Well, this is scary because I actually think Brief anecdote, on the weekend I was driving, there's a kid that I mentor, and I picked up my phone and I was texting while I was driving. And he said to me, this is really embarrassing for me, he said, I wish you wouldn't text while you drive. And I put it down and I realized, this is crazy. I know that my life and his life is far more important, and the lives of the people around me are far more important than any text message, which means I wasn't doing it rationally. It's just pure reflex at this point. So I don't think I pick up the phone because I don't even know what I'm looking for there anymore. It's just become reflexive.
Wow.
So for me lately, the longer I can keep that phone in a safe and write on a grant or this book, what I tell myself is the agitation is good. At least I'm not doing that. And then I find that as I start to write and I get into the process, I start feeling good about it, and I'll pause and say, okay, I have control. I have ultimate control over my behavior. I can put that thing away. There might be a nuclear war out there, and I'm just doing this anyway. I have control over my thoughts, my feelings, and behavior. So I tell myself that, and then I find I have immense energy, and all I want to do is write. And I kind of tunnel into the process.
Wow.
And I think that sometimes people need to write these things out for themselves so it's really concrete. I think some people are so unskilled at subjective rewards that writing it out is really powerful.
So what would you write out for yourself as a subjective reward for this experience?
As long as I'm writing, I'm on the right path. As long as I'm not writing and I'm looking at my phone, I'm not on the right path. Because for me, the 2 or 3 things that are most important for my career are writing grants, working on this book manuscript, and writing scientific manuscripts. I mean, there are other things as well.
And anything else that you're not doing is holding you back from doing that.
That's right.
So you need to be focused, center mass forward on doing those things.
That's right. So I don't do any jumping around, power poses, things like that. I will use tools to kind of ramp up my dopamine. There are certain songs that are really embedded in my emotional thing that go back to, when I was a, wild, skateboarding punk rock teenager that will get me fired up. And I think there's real utility. That's pure dopamine. That's just a dopamine.
Moments, but it's not sustainable. You have to subjectively keep yourself motivated, I guess. Right?
That's right. And then if I finish a chapter, I will stop for a moment and I'll just kind of smile and laugh at myself. I'm big on like self-reflection with humor and just think, this is crazy. My brain is under my control. There would be people out there that say there's no free will, but I do not believe that. I put my hands in a lot of brains. You stimulate certain brain areas, people do things. You stimulate other brain areas, people think things. Ultimately, unless you have electrodes in your head and someone's stimulating them, we are in control of our thoughts and behaviors. Wow. We can't control all of them, but my goal is to be as deliberate and non-reflexive as possible in life. That's my goal from when I wake up in the morning until I go to sleep.
How do we get to that place?
Little by little and by rewarding each thing. If you get up and I'll use the make the bed example, make the bed, you're not back on your heels, you make a cup of coffee, you sit down, you script out something in a journal, you exercise, maybe you call a relative that you think you need to hear from you or that you'd like to talk to. You do something in a deliberate way, just being deliberate and learning to push away the things that are trying to make you reflexive is so important.
Reflexive, same thing as reactive, or what's reflective?
Yeah, so there are 2 modes of brain operations. So now this is getting a little nitty gritty, but one is deliberate, where we're thinking duration, path, and outcome. What should I do? How long should I do it, and what's the outcome?
Deliberate.
Yeah.
Intentional.
And it feels like work. This is what people need to understand. That deliberate thought, deliberate action, writing the book, doing the workout you don't want to do, whatever it is, having the conversation, it's supposed to feel hard.
It's hard.
It's supposed to feel hard. But you should subjectively reward it so that you get better at doing that. So it's supposed to feel hard because it's associated with this release of these neurochemicals that create this agitation. The mental strain you feel when you're learning something is the trigger for neuroplasticity, for your brain to change.
Say that again, the mental strain you feel while doing something is the what?
Is the trigger for neuroplasticity.
Which neuroplasticity allows you to expand your mind to do more things.
That's right. So neuroplasticity is a process of taking something where there's duration, path, and outcome, where I'm working hard, I'm thinking hard, maybe it's a hard conversation, maybe it's a business plan, maybe it's a scientific career. And the goal of neuroplasticity is to make things reflexive so you don't have to think about them, right?
For instance, I just started taking Spanish class one-on-one, and it's extremely hard. It makes me want to say, why am I doing this?
Right.
This is going to take me years until I'm conversational. Who knows how long until I'm fluent? you know, if it's this hard as like this stage, man, is it ever going to get easier? I have those moments every time I'm doing class. I'm like, this sucks.
Right.
Because I'm like, oh, I'm 37. Can I learn this language at this point? It's so much easier when you're 5.
Yep.
Now it's almost impossible. I watched your video on this a couple of days ago on social media. And the video you talked about this is, yes, it's harder when you're older to expand your neuroplasticity, but what I'm hearing you say is like, it's the only way to live, is the older you get, you need to constantly be expanding it. Otherwise, you'll be going backwards.
That's right. So, you know, when you want to learn something new like Spanish or a new physical skill, your mind shifts over. The forebrain comes on and says, okay, we're going to pay attention to things. And now what am I doing? And
I get so tired.
we start doing evaluative stuff to other people, to ourselves. And you can start using all sorts of examples like, wait, you know, I was a professional athlete in your case, or I want to be clear, I was never a professional athlete, but you were a professional athlete. You've been successful in other regimes of life, but it still feels like effort, right?
Yeah.
And so, but that effort is because 2 things are happening. One is adrenaline, epinephrine is being released. So it doesn't feel great.
It's not fun.
It's like, And then, and in addition to that, by bringing focus to something, you're recruiting a neuromodulator called acetylcholine, which is the molecule of focus. Now, it's important.
Which takes energy and effort.
It takes energy and effort. You feel it in your body and in your brain. And it tends to acetylcholine will highlight the areas of your brain that are active during that learning phase when the teacher's talking or you're talking and making that effort. It's paying attention to how you're moving your mouth, what it sounds like to you, feedback cues. And it's marking those brain areas for change. And then later, when you sleep or when you work out or when you're having a conversation with somebody, that's actually when the brain changes occur.
So not during the actual activity.
That's right.
It's when you're not doing the activity, resting or recovering, when it starts to expand, or
That's
when it
right.
starts to
It's
grow.
when so neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change in response to experience, and is the main way in which we go from deliberate action, duration path outcome stuff, to reflexive action and thought. That process has 2 parts. One is the trigger, which is in adults is triggered by focus and attention and even a heightened state of agitation. The more frustrated you feel, the more you're actually triggering learning. It's saying, this is important, this is important. Because the brain just wants to do whatever it wants to do. It needs to cue itself to, oh, this must need to change. And then the second part is deep relaxation, meditation, in particular a form of meditation called yoga nidra, which we could talk about, but forms of deep relaxation, deep sleep, like slow wave sleep. That's when the connections between neurons, called synapses, actually get stronger. That's when the connections that you don't want get removed. And that's also in certain cases where you get new neurons actually born in your brain to help these circuits speak Spanish.
This is why in sports growing up, I remember I would go to like basketball camps in the summer and I would always learn new footwork. And I always just wanted to be like the fancy guy doing like whatever, finger roll layups or something as a kid. But then we would go to these basketball camps and we'd just work on the fundamentals and the footwork and like all this different stuff. And I remember being in the moment, it being very frustrating and challenging. I was like, I don't get this. And I would suck at it. But then the next day I would come back and I would all of a sudden like have it after a few times of doing it. But I never learned how to do it in the moment. It was always like, okay, I might have got it once, but then I fumbled on it. It was the next day or the next few days where it's like, oh, I can do this.
It just shows up.
It shows up.
It just shows up.
And that's because when the mind is able to relax, it's then making the connections on how to do that thing.
Yeah, so in deep sleep and rest is when the connections actually get built up. It's sort of like with resistance training, right? The gym is a little misleading, resistance training, because people get the famous pump, and so they get a visual glimpse into what they might look like later. But then, of course, it goes back down, right? But actual hypertrophy, the enlargement of the muscle fibers and the strengthening of the neural connections to those fibers is later when you sleep. So it's the same thing with neuroplasticity.
Yeah. How important is it for us to constantly be learning and challenging our mind the older we get?
Well, I believe it's very important for living a full life. And my hero in this, 2 heroes actually, is I would say Richard Feynman, the great physicist, who had a very playful attitude about learning. That's one thing that I really should illustrate. If you are in frustration and strain,
just have fun.
A sense of play is great, because in play you have focus, you have intention and alertness, and it keeps you light enough that there's that dopamine release. Dopamine is released in play for a reason. because kids and animals, young animals and young children, learn social interactions through play.
Yeah.
A puppy bites another puppy, and the puppy barks out loud. That's why they have those sharp puppy teeth, to say that's too much of a bite. Then they play a little bit more. They're finding the boundaries. They're finding the limits to which they can use physical force for hurting another or just for playing. They learn soft bite. Play in animals is an ancient form of sampling these neural pathways. And as adults, we tend to be more demanding of ourselves. We don't tend to embrace as much play. Richard Feynman is somebody who really incorporated a lot of play into his adult life. He learned how to, in addition to being a Nobel Prize winning physicist, he also played bongo drums. He learned how to sketch and paint late in his life. He did float tanks. He was kind of a wild man, but he had a lot of fun, and he was a lifetime learner. So I think it's important because it's a great way to learn dopamine release,
Right.
And it's a great way to expand one's experience of life.
This is when I was in Poland with Wim Hof earlier this year. I took a group of like 13 guys, and we were all nervous to get into this ice tub together for 10 minutes, like up to here. And for the first 2 minutes, it was not fun. We were just like, this sucks, this is cold. But then all of a sudden we were like, let's have fun. We're gonna be in here for 8 more minutes. We might as well try to enjoy it. So we started chanting, we started singing, we started just in a rhythm together, like smiling. And it was like, it's more enjoyable. It's still gonna be challenging, but you might as well try to have the most fun in the challenge than just suffer, right?
Yeah, team and community, not by coincidence, is a powerful tool for buffering stress. Children can learn very easily. Their brain is hyperplastic, and very quickly the whole job of the young brain is to take things that it's taught and very quickly pass it over to reflex, including morals and beliefs. And
automatic.
And this is what's scary is also, the things that kids hear and they believe and they're exposed to, those beliefs become reflexive. Now around age 25 or so, the brain is still plastic and forever for the entire life, but then you need more focus, and you need what's called self-directed plasticity, neuroplasticity. Self-directed meaning the only person that can change their brain for the better after about age 25 is the actual person. You can't force neuroplasticity on somebody, positive neuroplasticity. So the other element that's really important to plasticity is this deep rest phase. And it's associated with the release of the molecule neuromodulator serotonin. Serotonin is a reward molecule, just like dopamine, except that it's released in the brain in response to the subjective experience that we have enough resources. So when we eat a big meal, or we enjoy, even better, when we enjoy a meal with friends or family, and it just feels like one of those incredible evenings, you're reset. It's that feeling of being reset. It has an antidepressive effect. When we are, when you hold, if you hold your child or a partner that you love, or your dog, if you love your dog, there's this feeling of having enough. And so whereas dopamine is really the molecule that makes us look at things outside the boundaries of our skin, like to be in pursuit of things, it really is the pursuit motivation molecule. Serotonin is really about feeling like we have enough in our immediate environment. And it's so powerful because unless that serotonin box is checked off periodically, we cannot lean back into the dopamine outward pursuit process for very long.
So we need serotonin.
Absolutely.
To feel more, complete, whole? Safe.
Once you feel, this is where people, I think that the go-getters get it wrong, no pun intended, where getting after it and being hard driving is really important. But we've all seen examples of this. I've seen a number of these in Silicon Valley, friends that did very well in tech, get to the point where they reach that finish line, and then they don't have a whole lot of people to share that with, and they end up very isolated and depressed. And then they go through this whole cycle of trying to find themselves. And you need to balance serotonin and dopamine, maybe across the day, maybe across the week. I think in religious practices, all religions really, there's a kind of Sabbath, there's a rest period, for many, or I think all of them. That makes sense because there needs to be a renewal.
Did you say hot, cold?
Yes, alternate is even better.
Okay.
Because then you open up, close, and then you train the millions of little muscles in the vascular system, which is helping the blood flow go through the system, and then the heart rate goes down. That means stress, bye-bye.